Are you looking for healthier, fuller hair? Do you want extra money for bills, trips, extracurricular activities for your kids, or do you want to replace your entire income? Monat is the answer. Our products are Leaping Bunny certified, vegan, and Monat can be used by anyone, including your kids and pets. Message me on my Instagram to partner with me. Founder shares are available, and as a market partner, you have access to uncapped bonuses, 45% commission, 35 to 55% off discounts, on top of all-inclusive paid trips. Right now, I also have a free gift for anyone that partners with me, so don't miss out. You can message me on my Instagram at LizChilvers87.
We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today. Good evening, welcome along to NUFC Matters. It's a live Q&A with my good friend Gibbo. How are you?
I'm good, my friend, I'm good.
And a good evening from Anthony Gordon and Kieran Trippier, and it is a good evening as well, isn't it? What a result last night, John. Unbelievable. England saving their best performance for that first half of the match last night. Second half, it was tense, it was tough. A tactical change by Holland had us up against the ropes at stages, but the substitution of Trippier for sure seemed to flounder Netherlands, and it was a masterclass from Ollie Watkins from Aston Villa, who came on and replaced Kane, and of course Palmer as well, who had a wonderful season at Chelsea, providing the ammunition for the bullet to Watkins to fire, and England find themselves in the first final away from home shows, but in the second consecutive European final, John. What a time to be English.
Yeah, it's absolutely staggering. If we go back right to the beginning, Steve, and we were all involved in the beginning with talking with fans, etc. I mean, you couldn't visualize at all it ending in the way that it has with us in Berlin on Sunday, because, I mean, it's only a blink of the eye away from when England were getting absolutely pelted, and Southgate literally pelted with plastic cups by the fans when he went over to them at the end of a game. And he came out and said, if you remember the famous phrase, "I am the problem. It's pointless trying to put it right." So I tell you what, that change of attitude in him has changed the team completely. It's incredible. It is a rising from the dead. I mean, you know, his back was punctured by lying on that bed of nails so often, and now here we are. And that, I mean, what's it built on? I think tactically, it's the change of tactics going to the three at the back. We've looked a much more balanced side. We always knew we had very, very good players, but there were square pegs and round holes. They've looked a lot more balanced. They've lost the fear they had in the early games. What if we go out at the group stage? And they've replaced that with a siege mentality. It's us against the world. And yes, we've got to be truthful. We'll benefit by the right side of the draw. But that was a terrific performance last night, particularly the first half, when we were really dominant and the midfield absolutely strangled the Netherlands. And we're there and great. I mean, this is going to be a different ball game, mind, on Sunday, because Spain are by a country mile the best side in the competition, and they've won all 6 of their matches, which shows how great they are. And of course, the kid. I mean, the kid's been a breath of fresh air, hasn't he? I mean, it's his 17th birthday on Saturday, the eve of the game. I mean, the only hope we've got is that he eats too much birthday cake and he's bloated, or he's got too much homework and he can't get to bed and get to sleep like a baby overnight, and that's what he is, a baby. But he was quite something. But we're there, and that's terrific.
Yeah, fantastic. Well done, England. Looking forward to Sunday. Win or lose, Southgate shut his critics up, I certainly think. And another team, Greece has done it in the past. I remember in recent years, Germans have done it many times. Horrendous, poor form during the group. As they've progressed through the tournament, done well, and then gone and done it in the final. Denmark. England need to channel that kind of winners mentality now on Sunday and just get it over the line and do it by hook or by crook, however they choose to do it. I'm not going to concentrate on England too much more, but I do want to just talk about Anthony Gordon. Lot been written, a lot of clickbait out there, John, about potential fallout for Anthony Gordon with the manager, and is it because he said a certain thing at a press conference, he was too outspoken, etc. Lovely moment last night on the coverage on ITV. At the end of the game, Gareth was going around, of course, being congratulating some of the players. He was being congratulated as well. It was a lovely show of unity. And there was a brief shot of Anthony Gordon beaming, walking towards his gaffer, give him a big hug, and it was nice to see. And I really felt for Gordon. He's had 2 minutes. He's had 2 minutes more than some of the other people in that squad. And then Harry Kane's interview at the end, where he was basically saying that there's 15 disappointed people every time that the team is announced. I think it just emphasises the fact that this is a squad. This is a big squad. It's a talented squad. I think we all are frustrated because we know what Anthony Gordon could do and what he could bring it with. But we have to respect the manager's decision so far because he's got us to the final.
I mean, I think what sparked all these sort of speculation, what's going on, is that if you're a Geordie, you've seen week in and week out how superb Anthony Gordon has been in the last season for Newcastle United. You remember that this time last year, he was voted man of the tournament when in the under-21s, when we won the Euros. The under-21 side, he was voted man of the tournament. He's just got Newcastle United Player of the Year. And to only get 3 minutes in, 6 games is just staggered Geordies, and it's been unfathomable. Maybe it's not that he didn't start regularly, but that he didn't get on for only once in his whole campaign, and then only for 3 minutes. And I think what staggered other people as well, Steve, was that early on it was more obviously mind-blowing early on because Foden was playing as an out-and-out left winger. It didn't suit him. He never once went past his fullback, which Gordon does all the time, so we weren't stretching teams on that side. The new formation with Foden going inside alongside Bellingham just behind the centre forward has suited Foden and England so much better. It's been a different ball game, but it was hard to understand. But yes, we want Gordon to be happy. We want him to be good because we want him to come back in the right frame of mind for Eddie Howe to work his magic on him as he always does and tell him how much he's loved and wanted at St James's Park, so we forget all about the Liverpool thing and get on with making us a top 4 side.
Yeah, 100%. Lots of you in the chat today. Thank you very much for joining us on nufc Matters. If you're watching on Facebook or on Twitter, please jump over onto YouTube and subscribe to NUFC Matters. Big news coming out of St James's Park, certainly from the Athletics' point of view, John, who broke the story, is about Amanda Meardad leaving. Now, no official confirmation as we are live tonight, no official confirmation from the club or from Meardad and Amanda. I've given my opinion already on the channel today, and I know Mitch from the Amigos is going to give his tonight at 6 o'clock. But we've got a show tomorrow night, which we'll discuss it in depth. But what's your understanding? What are you hearing, John, about this situation?
Yeah, well, they've definitely gone, and I guess the club are not saying why at this stage, etc. And that's all. Silence always sparks off rumours, and there's rumours about Amanda's health, and there's rumours about a financial situation after being in a couple of court cases that had absolutely nothing to do with the club, but didn't help her finances, etc., etc. But if we forget about the reason why, and first of all, just accept that her and her hubby have gone and have left the club. Now, there's been a feeling for some while that would happen, because she came in and ran the show to start with, but the appointment of big beasts behind the scenes meant that her role within the club, if you like, has diminished. Nonetheless, I find it sad that she's leaving, because she has been the acceptable face of the takeover. I mean, the takeover morally was very suspicious for loads of people outside of the Northeast. I'm not talking in the Northeast, outside of the Northeast. And she was totally the acceptable face of the takeover. For straight away, we've got to thank her for getting rid of Mike Ashley and a decade and a half of absolute purgatory. That alone puts us in her debt, because she did that by persistently hanging in there against all the odds, against Ashley himself, against the Premier League objection, etc., etc., and she got that over the line. She was then right in the public eye in bringing Eddie Howe to Newcastle, in signing Trippier and Bruno, who made a huge, huge difference and set the standard for Newcastle United to get away from being a relegation haunted club to what we've become. She worked on Big Joe's contract. She was our representative at Premier League meetings, where she was terrific at fighting our cause. And of course, she's championed the women's team hugely in getting them to where they are, both within the club, getting them playing at St James's Park, the big crowds, winning a couple of promotions on the belt, etc., etc. So we owe her an awful lot, and she's done an awful lot for us. And the fact that she's gone, she's got to go with our gratitude and our thanks. And it does feel like it's a shame, and I think the timing of it as well, Steve, where people get a little uneasy, is that just over the last few weeks we've had a drip, drip, drip of just small things happening, but things that were a bit more negative. Having had 2 seasons of absolute positivity, we then got into a situation where we lost Dan Ashworth, who decided he was going to go to Manchester United. We replaced him, that's fine, but nonetheless he went. We've now got Amanda Staveley and her husband gone. We had to sell Anderson and Minter for PPF reasons. And how on earth we got ourselves into a position where, with just days to go, we were in danger of having a 10-point deduction. Goodness only knows. But I mean, it got so bad that it seemed everybody was available for transfer to try to raise the amount of money we used outside of Isaac. And that's how they actually offered Anthony Gordon, or the possibility of Anthony Gordon going to Liverpool, because no money had come in from Bruno's £100 million ceiling. Nobody had taken that up. There wasn't a deal at that time for Anderson and Minter, so they had to get the money from somewhere, and that was flirted with, which really disturbed me and disturbed a lot of fans because it's our blue chip players. So there's been a little bit of if negativity over the forced selling of a couple of players, or Dan Ashworth going, over Amanda going, over no signings as yet for big dough. Yes, we've got Kelly in, and that's lovely, but it's a molehill, not a mountain. It's transitions happen. I think it was always the Amanda thing was always come to an end, but that doesn't mean there isn't a sadness, and it leaves a void, because she was not just the face that was acceptable, but she was the voice of Newcastle United, because we've got owners that say nothing. The Saudis do not communicate. That's fine. Abramovich didn't communicate at Chelsea, etc., etc. A lot of billionaire owners do not communicate. They have other people to do that. But the person that did it well, and really got a link into fans who trusted her and loved her, was Amanda. And you think, well, who's going to do that now? Well, Eels would look to be the obvious guy, and yes, that's fine, and that's what he's paid to do. But it's not actually a voice of the directors. Then it's a voice of a paid servant, a very influential one, but it's his voice. No doubt, Jamie Rubin will run the match day, boardroom, etc., etc. But we will miss Amanda, and we've got to be grateful for what she did. It's a little blip. It's a little bit of negativity on top of a little other odd bits of negativity. We want that put right. And you know what put it right? Go out and sign an outside right in the centre half tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll be cooking on gas again, and everything will be back to rosy. And the thing to do on September the 1st, I want to see Anthony Gordon, Bruno, and Isaac still in black and white, and I want to see an outside right, a centre half, and a centre forward board. If those 6 things happen, we are genuine Champions League contenders next season.
Do you think we might hear something by the weekend, John? Because when a story breaks like this, the Athletic have got the exclusive, they've broken the story, no smoke without fire. Do you expect we're going to hear something from the club and Amanda and their dad soon?
I would like to think that we are, because I don't think silence is golden. Silence is not golden on a situation like this, because the theorists, the conspiracy theories, etc., just grow by the hour and by the day. And that is not good for Newcastle United. It needs put to bed. And what it needs is really, in an ideal world, a statement from the chairman, a statement of intent, telling us, I mean, it's private, but telling us as much as they can, a little bit, that it's down to her job being finished at the club because she only come in to run it, put us on, bring in the big beasts behind the scenes, and then bow out gracefully, or that it's for personal reasons and leave it at that, if it was health or finance or whatever it was. But as much as explain what happened, to put that to bed without going into too much detail, because it's Amanda's personal life, there's a need to put us on the front foot after what we've heard about financial fair play and the worry that anybody could be sold around June the 30th, after our goalkeeper has gone from a £40 million goalkeeper to a Forest Reserve, etc. We need some positivity. The club can do that with a good statement, a positive statement of intent on what's going to happen at Newcastle United, and then follow it up in the next month and a half with a good transfer window. Then we're up and cooking, because we have got a terrific start to the season. The Premier League computer has been kind to us, Steve, for once. That's lovely. But we've got to take advantage of that. And to take advantage of that, we haven't got to wait until Tonali can come back after 2 or 3 games and then get up to speed. We haven't got to wait for late signings on the last day of August when the season's underway. Let's get a couple in now. Let's change the mood back to what it was. And it's very simple to do because there's not a huge crisis at Newcastle. There's a little blip. Let's get it back. Let's get back on the front foot. But silence is not the way to do that. I mean, signings are the way to do it, but I think there's got to be, I would hope that Eels and the people behind the scenes will be going to the chairman and saying, look, we need a statement from you that puts the mood on Tyneside totally and exclusively optimistic again instead of little niggles in the back of minds.
And this is what I mean about, and I'm not saying Andy's wrong. Andy says, am I alone in thinking she's been pushed out, considering how hard she worked to get the deal done? For her to walk away is surprising. PIF, in my opinion, won't have been impressed with her recent troubles. I think it's open to conjecture and it's open to discussion until we get an answer. That's what I think. And, that's what John was getting at before when he said, silence is not golden in these kind of cases. And the longer this drags on, the messier it gets. So until we find out from Amanda herself and Mia herself and the club, of course, then, I guess we will only be, speculating on here. That's all we'll be doing. And John asks a question. He says, will we need to replace them if they do go, John?
No, they won't replace them because you've got to remember their position in the club is on the board, and they're not going to take anyone else on the board. The 80%, which is actually more than 80% now, the Saudis running it will continue to run it and will be supported by the Rubens, who at least are on site in this country, Jamie Rubin, etc. No, they will not be replaced because where she was absolutely crucial to us, apart from being the front person and apart from being the communicator, was that when the Saudis took over the club, there was no big hitters within the club. Her and hubby became the big hitters. Now we've got all the people in place behind the scenes. The big beasts have come into the club. They will take the workload she had and they will run with it. She will not be replaced. The only thing that I'm concerned about is who becomes the face of Newcastle United that she was. Because she was the face of Newcastle United. She may only have had 10% initially, and that reduced over time. But she was the public face. The chairman was not the public face. He didn't come up to St. James's Park, apart from match days, too often. He never made statements. He was never interviewed. The front of shop was the two of them. Somebody already at the club's got to step up into the front of shop. Now, Mr. Eels would look to be the obvious one. The other one that can take some of the load, if he so wishes, is Jamie Rubin. But we need a face. We need someone who does the job that Amanda did, i.e., becomes the public face of Newcastle United.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of days, isn't it always, following Newcastle United? We will wait and see. Whatever happens, the Amigos will have an opinion tomorrow night, so make sure you tune in 5 o'clock to hear what we think about Amanda and Mia Dad's imminent future. And let's move on. Quite a few questions coming in from you in the chat. Thank you, as always. Les, good evening. Les says, question, Gibbo, I used to make scrapbooks of your reports way back when. How do you feel about the changes to the role of journalists in today's era?
It is a totally different world. It really is a different world. And yes, I'm going to be biased. But what I don't like is what you had in the old days when Joe Harvey was at Newcastle and I was there. I would go up every morning to St. James's Park at about 9:30. And before training started, I would sit in his room with Joe, face to face, just the two of us, and would chew the fat, and I would ask me questions for that night's paper. Now, what that meant was that you actually stood or failed by your own ability, because you weren't in a pack. You can have a pack of 20 reporters now, and the questions will be driven by two, but the other 18 who don't ask a question still get all the answers. But you could get into a personal situation. You could challenge what the manager said if you didn't believe that, if you thought the answer was evasive, etc., etc. You do not get the same ability to do that these days. So I don't think that managers these days are held to account in the same way as they used to in the old days, when there was myself and Bob Cass and Doug Weatherall and a lot of the old guys around. I mean, it has changed absolutely hugely. I mean, and also physically. When I first started come back from Fleet Street and covered Newcastle in 1966, would you believe it? When we played at Leeds United, they had Leeds, a top club. They didn't have any phones in the press box. If I was doing a match report for the Pink, which was a runner, Saturday at 3 o'clock, a runner, I had to get a sheet of paper and write down who passed the ball to who, and the tackle and where the cross came in from. I had a little kid who was earning 2 and 2pence jag on his Saturday off school, who would come up to my shoulder. I would give him the paper. He ran downstairs in the press room, an open line phone to the Chronicle officers, and he read out what I said and then went back upstairs to talk to me. I mean, that is ludicrous these days. When I first went to cover not when I first went, towards the end of my time of covering the World Cup, I went to Japan and I was given one of these huge phones that, that looked like a brick, which are the mobile phone in those days, and it had a massive aerial that come out. I had to open the window in my hotel room and point this massive brick out the window to try to get the aerial to latch onto a satellite somewhere, and I could hear it go ting, and that meant I had a line back to the Chronicle. I mean, when I went to the World Cup and we played in, say, the Southern Hemisphere, I had to get up at whatever time it was where I was, when it was 9 o'clock in the morning at the Chronicle, so they had a copy taster in. I had to wait up. If it was 4 or 3 during the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, I had to wake up with my copy to read it across 9 o'clock there, so the Chronicle would get it. I mean, it's nowadays, with computers, boom, 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 off you go. A different world. And it's all progress, and that's terrific. And I'm not complaining or living in the past, because I want to live in the present at the moment, because the present's really exciting. And we'll get back to being what we ought to be, and can be more exciting, if that's possible, than when we won the European Fairs Cup all those years ago in 1969, because we might end up winning FA Cups and League Cups, and the world could be our oyster, which is going back to me saying, let's get some signings done in the next month and a half, and let's get going next season, and that'll be terrific.
Yeah, Craig, I agree. Craig says investigative journalism now is looking on Twitter or Facebook. It's not like back in the day when journalists pounded the streets and made contacts. 100% agree, Craig. And I mean, I've told the story on here many times. I put something out as a bit of a test. Got to be about 15 years ago now. No, maybe slightly less. I think it might have been about 9 or 10 years ago on X. That's what it was anyway, as Twitter as it was known then. And somebody ran with the story, and I hadn't done a research, and I put something out there in a particular way, and somebody picked up on it. And that is true. That is what happens. And look, I don't want to put John in a position, Andy, about that. What's John's opinion of the recent stick the Chronicle have received for blatantly posting negative articles? I think what's happened now, John, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think back in your day, the story that you and Malcolm have told on this particular program many times are about he always tells a story about Gordon Who, where Gordon Lee's the manager. He said Gordon Who to you, and the headline was Gordon Who says Supermac and he's Sun Lounger, wherever it is, and we all laugh about that story. I think because papers don't sell anymore and the money is earned by clicks on a computer, that I think those people who used to do the headlines, the headline makers, have now gone from doing it for the front page of the Chronicle and other papers to doing it on the internet. So they've got to create something. They've got to create a headline which makes us click. So people like Lee Ryder might get it in the neck for an article, but in fact, it's probably the copywriter who's had to put this headline in to get people to go and click on the article. So maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I think journalists are always going to get stick, John, because they're ultimately you're the bearer of bad news.
Sure. I mean, there's no question about that. But a sweeping generalization, and I'm not talking about the Chronicle or any particular paper or whatever, but cheap hits where you just regurgitate any story that's out there and you just say, as it's said on today's podcast as well, and is to me so nonsensical. So, I mean, honestly, I couldn't make a living that way because I would feel ashamed of myself. I don't want to go down that particular avenue, and I never have done. Good old-fashioned journalism, good old-fashioned foot in the door, good old-fashioned Joe. That was a great answer, apart from the fact that Dan said bugger all, and so I'm going to ask you again, and this time I want the truth. Is a lot more fun, a lot more direct, and a lot more faithful to your readers than what can happen these days. I mean, and some of the things that happen, but it's the world we live in now. Compared with what it was. And there's still wonderful journalists around, but they stand out like sore thumbs, and we all know who they are. And there's still chop journals around who do the job in the proper way, as I would call it. But there's a lot of just easy going, just let's regurgitate. I mean, that was a typical example. You say, if you put something out there, it can have no fact behind it. You're just floating something, but it's then accepted as fact and regurgitated and put out as a fact, which is horrendous.
I did that evening with Floyd Mayweather, and I did the Q&A with him at the City Hall, and I got him. It just shows you how wildfire it is. I got the clip. The first question I asked him on stage was, the last time you were in Gateshead, you said that you were interested in buying Newcastle United.
I remember that.
Are you still interested in buying our wonderful football club? And he said yes. And I got a video by a guy. He put it out there. It went worldwide because it was Floyd Mayweather, of course. But that just shows you how easy it is with it. And Gary, the answer is yes, because they do have to get you to click on an article. And I'm not. Let's broaden it a little bit, Gary. Radio stations have to do the same because that's where the money is. It's through those internet revenues now. Revenue streams go through those clicks, and the more clicks is where they make their money. It's the same as YouTube. You watch YouTube, and these channels that have got millions of subscribers. So that's why you see TalkSport, for example, going on live there now. Notice yesterday when the goal went in, BBC, ITV, TalkSport, and M3 all went with little short videos of their commentators celebrating the goals. That's where the money is, Gary. That's how they make their money. Anyway, we've got our sponsors. We've got to earn our money. So there we go. There's the ads. We'll be back after this.
A big thanks to all our sponsors. Skips and Bins. You can find their website at skipsandbins.com. Contact us, www.skipsandbins.com/contact. Say hello to low-cost waste disposal with pay-as-you-go and contract waste management. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Email info@mrvickies.co.uk. Telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks to United Group Travel. They are the Travel and Tourism Award winners in 2024. Their website, www.unitedgrouptravel.com. Email beverly.ugtl@gmail.com or telephone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. Just £30 per person deposit. There are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. A big thanks to Media Arts. You can find them at www.mediaarts.co.uk. media-arts.co.uk. And don't forget, we are a podcast. You can find us on iTunes or Spotify or other podcast providers. If you want to help the channel grow, then hit the like button, the little thumb underneath the video, click share and share to your social media, or join the channel for as little as $1.99 a month. If you want to take out a one-off payment membership, go to nufcmatters.com and hit membership. And for a £25 fee, you get a scarf, a cup, a pen, and a membership card. You can also put a smartphone over the top of this QR code. It'll take you straight there. And don't forget, we also help the food bank on this channel. nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk is a website where you can make a virtual donation today.
And last chance to buy your tickets for the end of season due. Supermac and Gibbo will be on stage. George will be on stage, and the Long Sands acoustic set in aid of Dementia Matters. And it's nufcmatters.com or newcastlelegends.com. Tickets at tenner. All proceeds going to Dementia Matters. And Gibbo's also got an evening with Rob Lee coming up on the 2nd of August. And that takes place at the Gateshead Leisure Centre. And you can get your tickets for that event from gatesheadleisurecentre.co.uk. All right, we did have a few more questions and a couple of comments which I wanted to touch on. Yvonne said, good evening, Yvonne. Nice to see a new name in the chat. I was there, John, 1969, Fairs Cup, and religiously buying the pink for your words. So there you go, John.
Well, a girl after my own heart, definitely, yeah. And by the way, both Yvonne and I are only 33, you know. It's amazing we were there in 1969, isn't it?
Ken says, watching in Mallorca, lads, these headlines from the Chronicle and Newcastle World are exactly the opposite of the story. Hence, the rise in podcasts, etc. Well, there's nothing wrong with a podcast to give an alternative view, just like fanzines did back in the day. All right, there's a few questions coming in. I'm going to try and pick something a little bit different. Somebody obviously wanting to know, Roger, good evening, wanting to know Jonathan David, anything in the Canadian links with him, John?
Yes,
Striker?
yes. Yeah, very much so. At the moment, they're spreading the net all over the shop. They're asking about everybody, which is the right way of going about things to try to find the right deal. And a lot of it is juggling the balls up in the air and hoping that you don't drop any of them, because to a great extent as well, how much money they can spend on an outside right, which is the number one priority, and then a right-sided centre-half, depends on getting people through the door as well. Not because we're skint, because we're anything but because of what we're allowed to do with financial fair play. So we've got to get people through the door. The other two that we got through the door, Anderson and Minter, was just to balance the books for the last financial year, which ended on June the 30th. But they've got to continue that. Now, who do we get out the door? And can we get them out the door? Obviously, Miggy Almiron comes straight into that. Callum Wilson does, as long as we then sign a centre forward. So there's some difficulty there. Do we cash in on Cripps, who's got a year left on his contract? There's the wrong side of 30-odd. We've got Livramento. He is a person to cash in on. We've got to get Ryan Fraser out the door. We will. He'll go to Southampton. Terms are agreed. Personal terms are agreed. It's just a matter of the fee. And Newcastle aren't going to turn their back on that totally because they want them out the door. And then the long-term guys like Hayden and Jamal Lewis have got to be got out as well. So there's people to get out to help us on the people we bring in. And of course, one of the blows, if you like, was that we're going to have to spend money to get a right-sided centre-half in now, because we felt we had Tossin in, who then went from Fulham to Chelsea, gazumped at the last minute, and he was a free transfer, so, like Kelly. So that would have been terrific. That's out the window now, so we've got to start buying. So it's a balancing act, but the number one priority is to get in an outside right, which immediately lets Miggy become available to go. Oh, and by the way, talking about finding other people, clubs, Dubrovka's another. We've already committed ourselves to the 4 goalkeepers for next season, so we've got to find a club for Dubrovka.
Interesting summer ahead, as I keep saying, if we ever get a summer in the northeast, of course. The weather's been atrocious. I'll combine a few questions. Tom Dixon, he said, where do you expect us to finish next season? John Askew said, should top four be the minimum requirement for next season? And somebody else asked a question as well about it. That was John again. If we can make 2 or 3 genuinely excellent signings, will we have an outside chance of title glory? Not playing in Europe and players back from injury and suspension could be huge. So lots of people asking, in a nutshell, what do you think we'll do next year, John? If we went in with this team that we've got now, I guess, even without any new recruits, would we have an outside chance of doing something, do you think?
The aim has got to be the top 4. And the reason for that is that once again, we're in the situation like we were when we made the top 4, i.e. there's no European distractions. There's only the 3 domestic competitions, the Premier League and the 2 domestic cups. So that the workload is not ginormous. And as I said when I was talking to you before, if we can take the 6 steps to heaven, we'll be in heaven. And that's keeping our 3 blue chip players and getting an outside right centre half and a centre forward. Certainly an outside right and a centre half. The centre forward depends on the Callum Wilson conundrum. But if we do that, we can make the top 4. We've got to look for that. I think it's hugely ambitious to think we can suddenly start tilting for the championship, the title next season. No, I don't. I think that's too early. But I would like to go one better than we did 2 seasons ago. I would like to finish in the top 4 and win a domestic trophy, our first trophy since 1969. And why not? We've only got to win one more match than we did the season before last. That is the final at Wembley, because we got to Wembley, and we've done that. I mean, the aim next season must be the Champions League, not anywhere in Europe. If we just miss out on the Champions League and we get the Europa League, well, that's something. But we've got to aim for the Champions League and aim for one of the 2 cups. Because if we got both of those things, and we almost did it 2 years ago, would really be cooking. But I believe that what we do between now and September the 1st, when the window's closed, will determine exactly where we finish next season.
If you're enjoying the show and you're watching on Facebook or X, please jump on YouTube and search NUFC Matters. We do 7 shows a week. Just hit the subscribe button. It is free. Okay, and next question from John. He says, afternoon, lads. What would be your preferred back 4 this season?
Great question.
There's information coming, that Paul Mitchell gets on with Trippier and that he's trying to persuade him to stay.
Oh, I'm happy for that, but I would start with Livramento, by the way, regardless.
Yeah.
I mean, my back 4 would be Livramento, Shaw, Kelly, and Hall as things stand. If we buy the right-sided centre half, that becomes a different ballgame. But Shaw's earned the right to start in the season. He had a brilliant season last time around, and he's had a good Euros, no question about that. And he's earned the right to start. We need somebody to challenge him as the whole season goes on. But I would start, if we were starting this Saturday, my back 4 would be Livramento, Shaw, Kelly, and Hall.
Okay, there's your answer, John. JJ says, John, do you have old photos of the ground? He says, the West Stand press box, Popular End and Lees's End, as I remember, metal orange barriers. He says, most fans remember concrete ones. He says, it's either me or the Mandela effect. Can you answer that question, John? Is he right or is he wrong? Or is she right or wrong? I don't know whether JJ is a man or a woman.
I mean, I remember concrete ones myself, but what I do remember, talking about the press box, the amazing thing about the press box at St James's Park was that it was on top of the roof of the main stand, where we now sit, the Milburn stand, was on the roof there. Now, we went up rickety stairs, which went round and round and round, right up to the roof, and sat literally on the roof. The only thing wrong with that was that the whole stand was wooden, and the fire escape from the press box took you down the outside of the building onto the roof of the stand, which was wooden. So if it was on fire, all you did was go, you become Guy Fawkes. You walk down onto the top of the bonfire, which was absolutely ludicrous. But in those days, it was the way it was. And if you remember that stand, it looked like, remember it was grey. It was painted in this grey, and it looked like a aircraft hangar. It was quite ridiculous. And I swear that press box up on the top of the roof would actually sway in the wind when it was a particularly windy day. It never seemed to be, nailed on, certainly. And the Chronicle paid for a sign just beneath the window I used to sit in saying John Gibson is here. And there was a big finger pointing up to the window where I was sitting above the finger. And I've got a picture that was taken from somewhere in the ground, I think at the Leazes end behind the goal. And it shows you this dome on top of the stand with this advert, John Gibson is here, and a big finger. One finger, by the way, not two fingers, pointing up at me.
Brilliant stuff. Great question. Love going back into those days and times. I remember that old press box. That was where I watched my first game, 1984, Keegan's farewell. Went there with my granddad, who was the referee assessor for the game. And I had to go up those stairs that John mentioned. And it was horrendous for me because back in those days, I had hair. But I was quite fashion conscious as a young lad. I liked to wear jeans and a T-shirt. I had to wear green flannel trousers, a pair of winkle picker shoes, and a white shirt, which was too tight for us, and a tie, which my dad had given us, and I had to have my hair greased back to go in there, John, and I had a coat on. I wasn't very happy, but I tell you what, I was happy when I went into that ground and saw Kevin Keegan and the team who I loved in my first game. Amazing. But I went into the press box that day. I met Jackie Milburn, I met Joe Harvey, I met Bobby Cowell, and I was sat next to the late great Peter Jones, who was doing commentary for the radio. That's where I was sat in the press box with my granddad. Great memories.
Yeah, wonderful days. I mean, I'm challenging you to dig out that old gear, because I'm certain you've still got it, and wear it on the programme next week, because that would be terrific. I would like to see you in that. Mind you, you'd have to put a syrup on, because I want you to look the way you did in the days when you had hair, the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, good days, mate. Good days. I did have hair. I don't wish it back, though. I certainly don't wish it back. Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left of the show. Let's get a different question. Let's stay with Newcastle, because there's one or two questions that have come in that aren't Newcastle related. I want to stick with Newcastle. Tom, I like this one. He said, John, is it hard being a journalist? And what is the most exciting thing to do?
Oh, it's not hard at all. It's wonderful. I remember being a little Ben in Benwell, and I'm talking about being a very little Ben at school, at junior and infant school at the time. And, everybody that was around either wanted to be a train driver or they wanted to play for Newcastle United. All my mates wanted to play for Newcastle United. And I didn't. I actually wanted to write about Newcastle United. Even in those days, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to write about Newcastle United. And I kept the scrapbook like the other guy was just talking about earlier in the programme. I kept the scrapbook, which was brown paper that was folded over together, and my grandmother sewed the side of the brown paper up to make it into a brown paper book. And I used to cut out photographs out of the paper this was when I was about 6 and 7, of people like Joe Harvey and Jackie Milburn, and paste them in this brown scrapbook. And then I used to write in pencil underneath, pretending I was a journal, write what I thought about that player. Amazingly, my daughter's found this scrapbook just recently, and it's back upstairs, thrown in the back of the wardrobe upstairs, and I've still got it to these days. I was a better writer in those days than I am now, but it's amazing to see it. And you know what was incredible is the way life turns a full circle for you. I mean, I looked in that book just a few months back, and there was a picture of Joe Harvey, and 2 or more pages on, there was a picture just cut out of the papers of Jackie Milburn. And I then went on to work with these people. and they've become personal friends in my life. When Joe Harvey was the Newcastle manager and Jackie Milburn was the journal, and sitting with me, and I worked with him, ghosting some of his books, and This Is Your Life, and all that. And it was wonderful to go from these guys that I idolized as a kid and actually work with them. And they say, never meet your hero because you'll be disappointed. You look at him in rose-tinted glasses as a school kid. Of course you do. Never meet your hero because he'll just be a human being and he'll be very disappointing. Well, I met my hero, who was Jackie Milburn, and he wasn't disappointing at all. One of the great, great people, as well as one of the great, great centre forwards that I've had anything to do with. And of course, remember, this year is the 100th anniversary of Jackie Milburn's birth. It was 100 years ago when Jackie came amongst us, and all us that were privileged to see him and get to know him are grateful for that day, because a true Geordie, as since have been people like Alan Shearer, etc., etc. But aye, happy days. No, I always wanted to be a journo, and I'm glad I was, because had I been a footballer, which is all what my mates wanted, I would have been retired in my 30s. And I'm old enough now to have lived another 856 years and still working. So I picked the right profession.
Did you ever have a Newcastle exclusive that you couldn't put out, says Neil Calvert?
Yes, quite a few times. And I talked myself out of an exclusive, and I think I've mentioned it on here a little while back, Steve, if I remember correctly. I got the exclusive that, just remembering one off the top of my head, that Stuart Barraclough was walking out on Newcastle on the eve of the FA Cup final in 1974 because he'd learned that he wasn't in the team for the Cup final, that Joe and Keith Birkinshaw were picking Jenky Smith, and he wasn't in the team, and he wasn't sub, and there was only one sub, so he wasn't going to be involved in the match. And he was a good friend of mine, was Barra, and I was told by one of the players, hey, Gibbo, Barra's upstairs, he's packing his gear, he's going home, he's absolutely decimated, he's in tears. And I thought, oh, God. I mean, you can imagine what a story that would be. In the Chronicle headline on the Friday morning before you play a cup final on Saturday, United star walks out on cup final, but it would have killed the kid. It would have killed his career stone dead, not only at St James's Park, but if he got a transfer to any other club, because he would be seen as unreliable, an upstart, a troublemaker. And I rushed upstairs to see him, knocked on the door, opened up, and sure enough, there was his case on the bed, and he was throwing his clothes in it. And I sat him down and said, whatever you do, you mustn't do this, Stewie. This is not going to work for you. This is going to ruin you. I can understand how upset you are, how passionate you are. Fans will think you're disloyal. They won't know that it's hurt you so much. They'll think you're just disloyal, disrupting Newcastle United on the eve of their biggest game for donkey's years in domestic competitions. And I persuaded him to stay, and he did stay. And so I talked myself out of one of the great stories I could have had. But I was delighted to do it because I was doing it for the good of a friend and for the good of the club that I love. And of course, I got many stories in the future of Stu and other players because they realised I could be trusted. And the wonderful thing, was that 2 years later, 1976, there was Stuart playing in a cup final at Wembley for Newcastle United in the League Cup. And so he got his Wembley dream with Newcastle just 2 years later. So that was an exclusive that I had and never used because of the greater good of other people. And I can tell it now. I don't. The Chronicle might have been a bit upset with me at the time, but they didn't know at the time. But I got many stories afterwards because of that loyalty I'd shown to players, and because players knew they could trust me. Then I would have got having one story, and then it was fish and chip paper afterwards. Sometimes you've got to forget the overall thing in your own importance, and you've got to put other people first. And I felt that was a moment to put other people first.
Yeah. Stephen Anderson says, you're an absolute legend, Gibbo. It's a privilege to listen to you.
Oh, well, I haven't listened to myself recently, so I don't know about that.
Guy George, he says, John, I was brought up in Benwell in the 60s. Did you go to Cannon Street School like me, or did you go to a posh school?
No, I didn't know the meaning of posh until the Spice Girls come on the scene. There was no posh in Benwell, but we didn't. Guy George will know all about that. There was no posh in Benwell, but we didn't feel underprivileged, because everybody was the same. We didn't know there was rich people because we never saw them. And I know Cannon Street School ever so well, but I went to Hackey Road School, Atkinson Road School, which was just down the hill from Benwell onto the next Armstrong Road in Hackey Road, and I went to that school. No, I didn't go to a posh school. I didn't know the way to a posh school. Anyway, you couldn't go to a posh school if you had holes in your socks.
That's a great question. Thanks for that one. And last couple to finish off with. Alan says, how will history remember Gareth Southgate? As on the fans forum, I was said to be sniffing glue for suggesting we would win 3-1. And apart from an offside goal, it could have been.
Yeah, it could have been. It's interesting, isn't it? Because he does split public opinion hugely. He splits my opinion. I mean, if you look at his England record, I think there's managers that are made for certain jobs, Steve, and managers who aren't. For example, I think he is absolutely geared to being an international manager. He is politically correct for the Football Association. He's meticulous. He gets all the cream of the best players without having to go into the transfer market and buying them, because you get the players because they are born English. And you do not have the trials and tribulations of day-to-day management. So I think he's suited for that. Now, Kevin Keegan was suited for club management because Kevin Keegan was a tub thumper. He was a Pied Piper. He was terrific at buying the right people, etc., etc. So he was made for this. He couldn't cut it as England manager, but he was a wonderful club manager. Gareth Southgate is a terrific international manager, but he cannot cut it in the hurly-burly of the day-to-day club management. At Middlesbrough, he was manager of Middlesbrough for 3 seasons to finish 12th, 13th, and relegated. That was his 3 seasons, and got the sack from Middlesbrough because of that. He is not a club manager, he's an international manager. Keegan is a club manager, not an international manager. Bobby Robson managed to straddle both and do both. He's got to be remembered because he's the most successful manager, England manager since Alf Ramsey. But I tell you what, and I've got to be truthful, Steve, in his greatest moment with us in the final on Sunday, and that I've got to be truthful, mate. I wouldn't want him to manage Newcastle United because he's cautious, he's defensive. And since when did we like cautious defensive managers? We like Bobby Robson and Kevin Keegan and Eddie Howe, front foot managers. So I wouldn't want them to manage my club. So I'm happy for them to manage England. And I hope he continues to manage England because that means Eddie Howe's not going there.
Couple of quick fire ones, both of the same ilk. If you could take one player from the current England squad to bring to Newcastle, who would it be, John?
Oh, there's a terrific question. Because on club form, I mean, just going off the top of my head, I would love Foden, I would love Bellingham, and I would love Declan Rice. On club form, not on the form necessarily shown with England, because until now, until the last game, when Foden absolutely ran the show in the first half the other night, he's been dreadful. But Foden is top of the pops. Declan Rice sitting in front of our back four and feeding the midfield. What a player he would be for us, without a shadow of doubt. I mean, I don't think I want the left back. That's because we've already got him.
And this question from Gary says, question for John: of all the England players No, that's not that one. It was another one that Gary put, and I seem to have lost it. It might not have been Gary, actually. It was, oh no, it was Gary, and I misread it. So I'll change it, because we've already had the answer to that question. Of all the other players you've seen in the Euros, John, is what I thought Gary had asked. Who could you see being a real asset at the club if you could just buy one? So let's broaden it, not just England, of all the players you've seen in the Euros. Anybody impressed you?
As a team, you can take virtually anybody out of Spain, out of the first team, not their subs bench, because their subs bench has got 3 Newcastle United ex-players on it: Marino, Rosie Perez, and Joselu. And despite what he's done, I don't want Joselu back. Thank you very much. He reminds me too much of your delivery.
Yeah, let's get Chris Wood back.
Sorry?
Let's get Chris Wood back.
Well, I thought you might say that, and yeah, we'll team him up with Joselu, and that'll stop us scoring goals next season. Because Chris Wood's had his great season. That's it for the rest of his career. I tell you what, I would be dead cheeky, and I would take the 16-year-old kid out of Spain that's at Barcelona, because I tell you what, if you got 15 years out of him, and at 16 you would get 15 years out of him. Can you imagine if he's like that now, what he's going to be like eventually?
Yeah. Prediction?
I would take him and send him to a lovely school and let him get his GCEs at the same time, and give him as much birthday cake as he wants, and then keep him off the booze and not introduce him to the nightlife of Newcastle, and we would be fine.
Prediction for the weekend, then. Give us your prediction for the big game Sunday.
Oh dear me, I wish I hadn't asked that. My heart says that we've defied everybody so far, and in the most dramatic of ways. I mean, penalty shootouts. Belgium scored in the 95th minute, else we were coming home after 96 minutes, if you remember, a couple of games back. Yeah. And then we score with the last kick. I want to say that we've been so amazingly predictable or unpredictable, that why not one more time and we'll win it. The only thing that stops me saying that is that Spain are a different class to anything we've faced so far, and a different class to anybody in the tournament. That doesn't mean you can have a one-off day. Just quickly to remind you of something, I wrote a book years ago, Steve, was called The Impossible Dream. It was the Ian Porterfield story of him scoring the winning goal at Wembley for Sunderland when they were a second division team, and they beat the mighty Leeds of Bremner and Alan Clark and Johnny Giles, Revy's side. That was unbelievable. Now, Sunderland had no chance in the final against that Leeds side because they were a different class to Sunderland. Sunderland won. We have no chance on Sunday against Spain because they're a different class to us. We could win. The same thing could happen. They put up a statue. It was so amazing. They put up a statue to Bob Stokoe at Mackhamland, if you remember. But mind, so what would they do for Gareth if you won on Sunday? But mind you, the same club, Sunderland, sacked Stokoe 3 seasons later. They didn't demolish his statue. They left that up, but they sacked him. So, you never know what's going to happen to you. If I was you, Gareth, I would win it on Sunday and quit. Yeah. Don't let them sack you 2 years down the road, because, hey, it happens. It happens. We sacked Joe Harvey that won the first cup. We sacked Bobby Robson and put a statue up to him. Leeds sacked Cloughie. You get sacked. Win the competition, Gareth, and take to your toes. Get out.
Good advice from Gibbo. Looking forward to having you and Supermac reunited next week. Be the slightly earlier time, hopefully at 10 o'clock next Thursday, because Newcastle United are back in pre-season training and the friendlies are on the horizon. But John, thanks as always for your time. Great show. Take care, mate. Have a great week.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Take care. See you next week, guys.